My name is Arthur Hale, and I used to be a lawyer in Iowa. Everything changed one quiet evening when my wife Ruth sat me down and told me she had fallen in love with someone else. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, but each word hit me like a hammer. I didn't yell or break down. I simply went upstairs, threw some clothes into a bag, and walked out the door. I couldn't even look at my two daughters before I left. The pain was too raw, too overwhelming. I bought a ticket to Los Angeles without any real plan. I just knew I had to get away. At the airport, my flight was delayed for hours because of a storm. I found myself sitting in a quiet corner restaurant, nursing a coffee and trying not to think. Eventually, I started talking with the other stranded passengers. We were all stuck in the same situation, so we became temporary companions. There was Dr. Samuel Foster, a middle-aged man with exhausted eyes and the smell of whiskey on his breath. He told me he was heading home to his wife Clara and their teenage son Henry. His hands shook slightly as he spoke. "I need to tell them the truth when I get back," he said quietly. I didn't press him for details, but I could see the weight of whatever secret he carried. Then there was Lily Grant, a bright-eyed young woman chasing her dream of becoming an actress. She talked about her upcoming audition with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. She mentioned that her husband's mother disapproved of her career choice and treated her coldly. Despite the challenges, there was hope in her voice. The last person in our group was Frank Doyle, a cheerful, traveling salesman who never seemed to run out of stories or jokes. He pulled out a photograph of his wife Ellen and showed it to all of us. "Isn't she gorgeous?" he said with unmistakable pride. In the picture, she was indeed beautiful, smiling radiantly at the camera. We spent 4 hours together in that airport, sharing pieces of our lives with strangers who somehow felt like friends. Before we finally boarded, we exchanged phone numbers and made vague promises to stay in touch. We all knew we probably wouldn't. The plane took off into dark skies. Not long after, something went terribly wrong. I remember the violent shaking, the screaming, and then nothing. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. The crash had killed 18 people. I had survived, Dr. Foster, Lily, and Frank had not. The guilt was crushing. I felt responsible somehow, as if I should have died instead. I couldn't stop thinking about them, about their families waiting for them to come home. So I made a decision. I found their phone numbers in my belongings and called each family. Then I went to visit them in person. First, I drove to see Clara Foster. She answered the door looking pale and frightened. She already knew about the crash. Through her tears, she told me that her son Henry had run away from home. "He hates his father," she said bitterly. "He thinks Samuel chose his work and his drinking over us." I asked if she knew where Henry might be, and she gave me an address. I found Henry staying with a friend. He was angry and defiant when I first approached him, but I told him what his father had said at the airport. "He was coming home to tell you the truth," I explained. "Whatever mistakes he made, he wanted to make things right." Henry stared at the ground for a long time. Finally, he whispered, "Maybe I should go home." A week later, Clara called to thank me. Henry had returned. Next, I visited Mrs. Grant, Lily's mother-in-law. She was a stern, cold woman who immediately started criticizing Lily's choices. I interrupted her gently but firmly. Lily was offered a significant role just before she died. I told her that, and despite everything, she spoke warmly about you. She wanted your approval. The old woman's face softened slightly. She said nothing, but I could see something shift in her eyes. Later, Lily's husband called to thank me for helping his mother begin to grieve properly. My last visit was to Ellen Doyle. I drove to the address Frank had given us and found a small, modest house. When Ellen opened the door, I was confused. The woman in front of me was in a wheelchair, and she looked nothing like the woman in Frank's photograph. She saw my expression and smiled sadly. "I'm not the woman in that picture," she said. "Please, come in. Let me tell you the real story." Ellen explained that early in their marriage, she had left Frank. She found him embarrassing, too loud and immature. She fell in love with a man named Martin, and they ran away together, driving across the country with dreams of a new life. One afternoon, they stopped by a lake. Ellen went swimming alone. She dove deep and hit her head on something under the water. When she regained consciousness in the hospital, she couldn't feel her legs. The doctors said she would never walk again. Martin stayed with her through the diagnosis, but when the reality of her paralysis set in, he disappeared. He simply stopped visiting one day and never came back. Ellen spent months in that hospital, drowning in shame and despair. Then Frank appeared. He walked into her room, looked at her with those same cheerful eyes, and said, "Hello, beautiful." He took her home without a single word of judgment. He never mentioned her betrayal. He never made her feel guilty. He just loved her. "I used to think love was passion and excitement," Ellen said softly, "but real love is forgiveness. Real love is staying when it would be easier to leave." I drove away from her house in silence, her words echoing in my mind. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Ruth, about my daughters, about how quickly I had run away. I thought about Dr. Foster trying to come home to tell the truth. I thought about Lily fighting for her dreams despite opposition. I thought about Frank, who had chosen love over pride every single day. I picked up my phone and called Ruth, but my hands were shaking. When she answered, I could barely speak. "I'm coming home," I finally said. She started crying, and so did I. I understood then that leaving is the easy choice. Anyone can walk away when things get hard. But staying, fighting for what you love, forgiving and being forgiven, that takes real courage. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply go home.